And we welcome you back to Up Close. We're talking this morning with the Democratic candidates in the race for New York's 8th Congressional District in Brooklyn. They are Assemblyman Hakeem Jeffries and City Councilman Charles Barron. Let's continue the conversation, though. I want to change the topic, though, and move on to something else. Stop and frisk. Big issue in District 8. I know you both oppose the policy.
Well, you know what?
Right?
You know, it's not. What people are missing is racial profiling. Stop and frisk is an extension of racial profiling, and that's what's the violation.
Right.
We've
had these discussions on this broadcast before. So let's take it the next step. What's the solution? If not stop and frisk, what is the answer?
First of all, stop and frisk is not effective at all. 700,000 people stopped and frisked. What, only 12% committed any crime? In my East New York, 31,000 stopped, 3%. What I think needs to happen, we need to get back to community policing. We're involved the entire community.
So you would support community
policing and not stop and frisk because it's a violation. And what I think needs to happen with any commission, and I think Ray Kelly needs to go, in my opinion, but what commissioners need to do, they need to be forced to respect the communities. When I get on a federal level, no precinct that engages in racial profiling, which is a violation of the Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that the United Nations and the United States signed on to. I would say no money for those precincts that profile.
Give his thoughts. Hakeem, what would you say? One, do you support Ray Kelly? And two, what do you say about the idea of community policing, or what is your solution for stop and frisk?
Well, in a democracy, there's got to be a balance between effective law enforcement on the one hand and a healthy respect for civil rights, civil liberties, and the Fourth Amendment on the other. And clearly, Commissioner Kelly, in the area of stop and frisk, has not struck that appropriate balance. Now, we want to see a continued dramatic decline in crime that actually began during the last 2 years of the Dinkins administration with aggressive community policing and has continued subsequently over the next 18 years. But the stop and frisk activity, hundreds of thousands of individuals, the overwhelming majority of whom are innocent, law-abiding, have done nothing wrong, cannot continue to have their civil rights violated. It creates a poisonous relationship between the police and the community, minimizes cooperation, and ultimately hurts effective law enforcement.
Do you think
Ray Kelly must go?
Yeah, do you think Ray Kelly should go?
Yeah,
I'm asking my question.
I've said that after 10 years or 11 years, it's time for any commissioner, certainly Commissioner Ray Kelly, who continues to stubbornly adhere to the stop and frisk program that blatantly violates the Fourth Amendment of hundreds of thousands of innocent law-abiding people each and every year, the majority of whom are black and Latino, that it's time to move in a different direction. And if Mayor Bloomberg continues to adhere to this policy, that when I go down to Congress, I'm going to pressure the Department of Justice to conduct an investigation into the blatant civil rights abuses that are taking place at the hands of the NYPD.
You know what I'm going to do to show you how nice I am? Since I'm going to be the one to go to Congress, I'm going to commission him to do that for us. But anyway, let me say this real quick. Stop and frisk and crime. We have to stop seeing police containment, more prisons, tougher sentencing, and all of that to address the crime. We have to get to economic development and job creation in those areas where the crime is high. When the crime is up, they bring more police. How come when unemployment is up, they don't bring more jobs?
Moving on to next thing, education. You two differ on charter schools. You support charter schools. You don't support charter schools at all. Well, let's start with Hakeem on this one. You like charter schools. You like good charter schools, obviously. Why?
Well, I have the same exact position on charter schools that President Obama has, Reverend Al Sharpton, Pastor A.R. Bernard, the Reverend Dr. Johnny Ray Youngblood, and Governor David Paterson. I recognize that the public school system has been broken for decades, where essentially tens of thousands of children have been doomed to life sentences of disadvantage and despair as a result of the miseducation that we have allowed to exist for too long. Now, charter schools are just a small solution to a broader problem, but they do provide for at least an opportunity to create a vehicle by which different methodologies can be employed that hopefully will demonstrate that you can do things differently and get different results.
That is totally,
disagree?
Totally. Plus, you could drop all the names you want. The bottom line, they say he flip-flopped on charter school. One minute he was for it, one minute he's against it. and he gets big money from hedge fund companies that fund charter schools, and some people say that's why he changed his position.
Well, that's just an inaccurate statement.
Let me just say this about...
I'm going to let you respond to it.
But let me just say this about charter schools. This is the bottom line. The Department of Education has a $24 billion budget. When I came in here, they had $11 billion. Mayor Bloomberg had, over the 10-year period, $150 billion to educate 1.1 million educable children. When you co-locate a charter school in a building that was designed for one school, and you bring in 3 and 4 charter schools in that building, taking money from the public school system. These are private entities that they call an oxymoron public.
So you would have just put that money into the public school system?
Put it in the public school system. Okay. And let me say this about charter schools. The charter high schools, when all is finished, only 13% of the children that graduate under Bloomberg's system is prepared for college or a career. And if they go to a charter high school, only 10%. Charter high schools have failed, and it's a myth that charter schools are so much better. They were supposed to be a model.
Let me let Hakeem have a word in here,
because for the entire...
You made some charges against him. I want him to respond to that and give him the
That's what they say.
Well, the African-American clergy has been very supportive of charter schools, whether that's Floyd Flake in Queens, or Pastor Calvin Butts in Harlem, A.R. Bernard, Dr. Johnny Ray Youngblood in Brooklyn. I've been very supportive of their desire to make sure that they can create vehicles by which the children from the Bedford-Stuyvesant, Crown Heights, East New York, Brownsville communities can have a better chance at educational success.
It's all right to have charter schools, but don't take the money from public education.
Well,
Let
Diana,
them get it from the private sector. The private sector.
Okay.
Let me just finish my point. Now, as it relates to this private-public distinction, in 2010, I was the co-sponsor of the bill as it relates to the Race to the Top legislation that was passed that allowed us to access an additional $700 million. And one of the things that we did in Albany was to outlaw for-profit corporations from being able to run charter schools. But listen, the whole charter school debate is that's absolutely what we did.
No, hedge fund companies still fund charter schools, and he knows that. That you can check it out for yourself.
Through a not-for-profit vehicle.
So come on now, you know, if they go through a not-for-profit, they're still putting in the private hedge fund money. That's a scam that they use to make money.
We can discuss public policy, or we can have a conspiratorial debate.
Conspiratorial debate, that's a fact. That's a fact.
Let's talk about the facts. The facts are really, at the end of the day, that the whole discussion of charter schools versus traditional schools, inner city schools versus suburban schools, specialized schools versus zone schools, it's all a distraction. We just need good quality schools. And 95 to 97% of the students in the public school system will be educated by traditional schools. That's one of the reasons why we fought hard to get an additional $805 million in education funding this year.
Number of charter schools. That's an incremental way of privatizing public education. That's what they're doing.
Let me move on to our next question here, because you two have very different ways of governing. And Charles, you have been known for making some inflammatory statements. You've said things. You are aggressive.
Inflammatory to who?
Well, you want me to go through the list here?
I'm sure you have a list of inflammatory statements.
So my question for you is, does that rhetoric work in Congress?
First of all, I don't know what rhetoric you're talking about, but let me say this. Everybody is controversial. You know what controversial means? You stir up disagreement. Mayor Bloomberg is controversial. The governor's controversial. But you know, they don't call those leaders controversial. But if a black leader stands up strong against the system and speaks out strong, we become controversial, inflammatory, divisive. Now, our people in the district that I've gone through, and all of my statements are public, they're out there, they know about it. Not one person in the district brings up the statement. The media does, but not the people. They want to know who's going to create the job.
Let me just say, you called Libyan leader Gaddafi a hero. You said that the Democratic Party is structurally racist. You compared Gaza to a concentration camp.
Don't get a roll going. Let's say structural racist.
Okay, I don't want to go through each one.
No, you cannot put that out there and then not let me respond. Since you put it out there, since you put it out there, let me say, if you have an all-white structure, that's racist. If you have no black person in the structure, if you have the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney, all of the top leaders were white. and they had an opportunity to put a black lieutenant governor at least in that, and Hakeem nominated to complete the white structure. So that was racist. That's structural racism. That's not inflammatory. That's the truth.
Well, actually, I came to the conclusion that at the time, the Democrats were still in control of the majority. State Senator John Sampson was one of the 3 most powerful leaders in the state, who happens to be an African American. And if you have any understanding of state governmental
structure, that wasn't a political. I'm talking about the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and you know all of those elected positions. I'm not talking about John being appointed.
Right.
You all knew that.
If you have any understanding of the state governmental structure, you've got the Senate majority leader, who's powerful as it relates to getting things done programmatically. You got the Speaker of the Assembly, and you've got the governor. Now, as it relates to Congress, it's a serious job. These are serious times. We need serious representation down in Washington. We've got too many people down in Washington who are only concerned with promoting themselves, and I think that we've got to get away from that model, which has not worked over the last 2 years. When you've got people so obsessed with promoting their party and destroying the presidency of Barack Obama, they've shown that they're willing to take the whole country down with them. And that's why we need responsible leadership down in Washington at this point.
We got enough go-along, get-along politicians that will not stand up to the powers that be and will not mobilize and organize movements and masses that make impact on budgets, policies in Washington. We need a fighter in Washington, not a go-along, get-along politician.
So he's asking the next question I was going to ask. How, you know, for as outspoken as he is, what would your style be?
Well, my capacity to get along with people, to forge relationships, and to create coalitions to get things done, I think is understood by people throughout the community in the 8th Congressional District. It's why we've got such tremendous support, as well as by many of my colleagues in government. One of the coalitions that I was able to build by getting along with people but unifying around an issue that was significant was the stop and frisk database, electronic repeal that we were able to get accomplished.
And that didn't stop and frisk.
Well, we're going to have to take one more break. You both get a final word when we come back. We will be right back with final thoughts from the candidates in the Democratic primary for New York's 8th Congressional District after this.